What is the history of healthcare planning? Where are its origins? Who were the key players, and how did it get to where it is today? As it all started around the same time as the birth of rock and roll, it seems appropriate to tell the story in the style of a rock family tree. In 1954, the year Elvis Presley recorded That's All Right, saw the publication of another chart topper, the Nuffield Provincial Hospital Trust Studies in the Function and Design of Hospitals, with string diagrams illustrating a nurse's daily movements around the ward, an analysis of how to design an efficient hospital. It was an early signpost on the road that eventually led to healthcare planning. John Weeks, who'd worked on the Nuffield project, went on to co-found Llewellyn Davis Weeks, which became one of the UK's most successful healthcare architectural practices. Another young architect, jazz clarinetist, and lifelong friend of Weeks was Ray Moss. In 1956, the year Miles Davis recorded Round About Midnight, Ray, who liked to tell of how he grew up in a workhouse that his mother and father ran, won a prize for studies in the improvement of hospital design. At the dawn of the 60s, Ray joined the newly formed architects branch of the Ministry of Health and helped to write the score for Health Minister Enoch Powell's debut album, The Hospital Plan, the UK's very first coordinated health and building programme. Meanwhile, Joe Meek, comparable in eccentricity to Powell, was producing top classics like Telstar, Johnny Remember Me, and the Honeycombs' Have I the Right, all from his bathroom. In 1967, the summer of love, Southend band The Paramounts became Procol Harum and had worldwide success with A Whiter Shade of Pale. Although it didn't attract as much attention at the time, something else was happening in Southend, at the Technical College where Ray Moss established the Medical Architecture Research Unit, MARU. By 1975, when Bruce Springsteen came to London and was declared the future of rock and roll, MARU had moved to North London Polytechnic, only a few hundred yards down Holloway Road from where Joe Meek had met his tragic end. Arriving in that year was Carol Rawlinson, who brought the space utilization analytics she had pioneered in higher education and had began to apply them in healthcare. She was joined by John Kelly, who had developed an interest in organisations and their environment in his time at London University's Medical Sociology Research Unit, and later by Paul Whittleston, an architect from Hull, soon to become famous as the home of the Housemartins. Together, they set out to become the future of healthcare planning. The 1980s, the indie years, saw a shake-up in the music industry in the aftershock of punk, with labels like Stiff and Rough Trade challenging the complacency and inertia of the corporate giants, and bands like The Smiths strutting a different attitude. Something similar was happening in healthcare planning. In 1989, the year that the Berlin Wall came down and the travelling Wilburys raised the bar for anyone calling themselves a supergroup, John, Paul and Carol left MARU to form RKW, the UK's very first specialist healthcare planning consultancy. Veteran folk rockers Fairpoint Convention reckon, but can't quite be sure, that something like 50 people have been in their band. Over its 18-year history, RKW saw a similar number pass through across a wide range of disciplines. Amongst these was Dubliner Tina Nolan, who joined in 1991 just as the re-release Bohemian Rhapsody became the Christmas number one. But even Brian May would have to concede to Tina in a big hair contest. Tina was still there along with John and Paul when in 2008 RKW became part of EC Harris, except for Paul, who, a bit like Norman Cook when he left the Housemartins, went off to do his own thing at Capita and later IBS. The 21st century saw a flourishing of world music, but the closing years of its first decade were tough, and not just because of what Simon Cowell was doing. But the RKW team and EC Harris kept all their clients, hit all their targets, and opened new markets in Australia and in Canada. In 2010, Tina went solo for a while and duetted with health economist and Lloyd Cole fan Richard Darch in Healthcare Partnering. This became a trio when John joined in 2012. Richard had enjoyed success with his own consultancy, SDC, with whom RKW enjoyed a healthy rivalry in the Britpop years, a bit like Blur vs Oasis, but without the threats of violence. Once Richard had compared the new outfit to Blind Faith, which was a brief 60s reunion between Eric Clapton and Ginger Baker, it was inevitable that the members would eventually go their separate ways, although much more amicably than Ginger and Eric. In 2014, Pharrell Williams had a big hit with Happy, and Tina having just got things going in the Middle East, joined Accenture. Here she assembled the healthcare planning team, which today comprises original band members Polly Boyle, John Kelly, Matthew Lewis, and Tony Virtue, along with new arrivals Kate Campbell, Allegra Dowding, Rachel Hall, Jack Goodall, and Carl Bates. And here are some of their recent appearances, including Frimley Park Hospital's NHSFT, Leeds Teaching Hospital's NHST, Qatar, Tavistock and Portman NHSFT, King's Health Partners, Imperial Healthcare NHST, Bedford and Milton Keynes CCG, Guy's and St Thomas NHSFT, New Children's Hospital Dublin, and Craig Avon. And what about the next 60 years? Well, we're pretty confident that the Rolling Stones will still be going. But like Humphrey Layton said about jazz, if we knew the future of healthcare planning, we'd be playing it.